In 1992, Rabbi Joseph Telushkin wrote a book with a great title. The title is Jewish Humor, What the Best Jewish Jokes Say About Jews. And while Rabbi Telushkin dedicated this book to his three daughters, Naomi and Rebecca and Shira Telushkin, one of the main points about his book is that it's really easy for Jewish parents and Jewish children to get it wrong. It's really easy for there to be conflict and friction and tension between parents and children and between grandparents and grandchildren that grows and grows. That's why the first chapter in his book of Jewish jokes that say a lot about Jews is called Oedipus, Shmedipus, as long as he still loves his mother. And this is the first joke in his book of jokes. Three elderly Jewish women are seated on a bench in Miami Beach. Each one is bragging about how devoted her son is to her. The first one says, "My son is so devoted that last year for my birthday, he gave me an all-expense-paid cruise around the world, first class." The second one says, "That's nice, but my son is even more devoted. For my 75th birthday, last year, he catered a lavish affair and even gave me money to fly down my good friends from out of town." The third one says, "That's nice, but my son is the most devoted son yet. 3 times a week, he goes to a psychiatrist. Each session, he pays hundreds of dollars. And what does he talk about the entire time? Me." Now, why should that be? Why should it be so complicated between parents and children and between grandparents and grandchildren? After all, if you zoom out, it would seem like parents and children are natural allies. It would seem that parents and children, we're on the same side, we're on the same team. We share so much. We share a home. We share the same roof. We share genes. We share a family story. We share a past, a present, and a future. We share values and dreams. After all, if you're in a family, your success is even more important to me than my success. So what could possibly go wrong? How could it possibly be so complicated? And yet it is. And we know that not only from Joseph Telushkin's book of jokes. We know that from the Haftorah today from Malachi. This is Shabbat Hagadol, the special Shabbat, trying to give us a message right before we sit down with our family members around the Seder table. And the climactic passage of Malachi, the passage that gives this name, the name Shabbat Hagadol, is that the prophet imagines that one day in the distant future, there is going to be a special Yom Adonai Hagadol V'Hanorah, a special day of the Lord that is going to be great, Hagadol, Shabbat Hagadol, V'Hanorah, great and awesome. And what is going to happen on this great day of the Lord that is so awesome? Answer, that God is going to cause parents to reconcile with their children. And God is going to cause children to reconcile with their parents. And we learn from this Haftarah some things about parents and children. Number one, that it is rare and hard for parents and children to get it right. Number two, that it is easy and commonplace for parents and children to get it wrong. And number three, that it takes an act of God to make that happen. Now, if we're on the same side and we have so much in common, why is that? So I want to say there are some factors that could explain generational disconnect that are obvious. We all know and live them. Many of us know and live them. And then there's one that is less obvious, absolutely ubiquitous, but it's like the oxygen we breathe. It's like the water in an ocean for a fish. It's just so common we don't see it. Here's the obvious ones. Parents and children can and do sometimes disagree about politics. Parents and children can and sometimes do disagree about Israel. Parents and children can and sometimes have very different experiences with all ubiquitous technology. There is obviously a big difference between being a digital native, you're born with the phone in your hand, and an older generation that doesn't know how do you use this screen. But there is also a big difference between the stories and the histories of parents and children and grandchildren that shape their future. If you remember the classic comedy 30 Rock with Alec Baldwin, he memorably observes about one family that the patriarch of the family, the grandfather, grew up without 2 nickels to rub together. And he worked 7 days a week. And he worked night and day. And he created a business that prospered and that thrived and that made him and his family very affluent. And his granddaughter now does improv. And that's so real. And that's all lovely. The business is lovely. And improv is lovely. But they're just very different. And so these generations, one person works night and day and raises a business, and the other grows up in affluence and does improv and stand-up. Lovely, just different, and sometimes it means that they don't always connect. So those are the factors we get and we know. We disagree about politics, we disagree about Israel, we have different experiences with technology, and we have different stories that shape our present and future. There's also an experience of this that I think is the deepest one, that it's hard to even describe what it is, but I will share with you this story, which is so revealing to me. It was one of my late father-in-law's favorite stories, and so prismatic and so revealing, at least to me. He tells the story of the time that he and my mother-in-law, they were in their early to mid-20s, and they had been born and raised and lived their entire lives in New York. And my father-in-law had just been ordained at the seminary, and he was getting his first posting as a chaplain in Chicago. And now at 24, 25, they're going to start their adventure together. They're going to go to Chicago. They're going to finally leave New York. They can't wait. They're young, and they're in love. And they're going to be on an adventure, and they're going to drive, and oh my God, it's going to be amazing, Chicago. And so they pack up. They pack the car, and they spend that last night with my father-in-law's mother, who is a widow, and he is her only child. So they get there and talk and have a nice night. And then my in-laws get up at 3 in the morning to get in the car and to start their adventure. And they realize that his mother has prepared an entire robust breakfast feast. Don't go yet, you have to eat breakfast. Here's fresh bagels and cream cheese and lox, and also eggs and also omelets, and also biscuits and muffins and cookies, and chalava, I know you love chalava, and coffee and juice, please eat my kinder. And so eat they did. And my father-in-law always told that story from the point of view of being 25 years old. And I can't wait to start my adventure. We couldn't wait to start our adventure. And what it's like from the point of view of a 25-year-old. And then roll the film forward. He's 86, and his wife passes away. And he's now all alone. And he used to have somebody who would say to him every night at the end of the day, "How was your day, dear?" And now his dinner companion is an iPad, a screen. No human to say, "How was your day, dear?" And now he revisits that story from the point of view of not two young, healthy, robust, optimistic, happy 25-year-olds, but from a widow whose only child was driving across the country and who's going to be all alone again, naturally. Now, my father-in-law was a loving son, and he was empathetic, and he loved his mother. So how could that be? How could that be is that we are all so immersed in our own reality that it is really hard to see the reality that is not our reality. And the fact of the matter is, when it comes to generations, we're all dealing with different stuff. 20-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 60-year-olds and 80-year-olds and 90-plus-year-olds. We're all dealing with different stuff, and we are so in our own reality that it is really hard to see the reality of somebody else. There are no villains in this drama. It is just the all-powerful primacy of the recency bias. The moment we're in is the reality we see and feel, and it's just hard to see and feel the reality of somebody in a different moment. So, that's why Telushkin starts with Oedipus Shmedipus. And that's why Malachi talks about a day of the Lord that is going to be necessary to sort this out. And that's why it's complicated between parents and children and grandparents and grandchildren. So what do we do about it? So I think it's not a coincidence that we read Malachi now, because here's the good news. Here's the good news. This is solvable. We can fix this. We can solve this. And it's a secret sauce, and it's a simple sauce. And all you need to solve it is around your Seder table tonight. All you need to solve it is three simple things: a really good evocative question, listening ears, and genuine curiosity. Now, at our Seder tonight and tomorrow night, we're going to ask a question that was inspired by the remarkable sermon delivered here just last week by Mishael Tzion. In the history of the temple, it's hard to imagine a better opener than Mishael Tzion's opener last week if you were there. Here's the opening line of his sermon. "I am here," Mishael Tzion said, "because of a story that was shared in a sermon." And he goes on to explain that his grandfather was a young boy in Holland in the 30s, as the shadow of Hitler and the Third Reich were creeping along Europe. And he tells the story that there was an itinerant Christian preacher who would bike from church to Christian churches. And he would tell the story about a cruel king, Pharaoh, who arose, who wanted to drown the Hebrew newborns. And there were these midwives named Shifra and Puah who resisted his evil decree. It was a short sermon. And then he would say, "I got three questions for you. Who is Pharaoh today?" Obvious answer, Hitler. "Who are the endangered Israelites today?" Answer, our Jewish friends and neighbor. "Who will be the midwives?" Who will be the midwives? And he would leave them with that question, and then he would bike to 40 different churches and deliver that sermon. And Mishael said that his grandfather's alive because somebody heard that sermon and saved the little Jewish boy who would grow up to become Mishael Tzion's grandfather. If you're using one of the Hartman Haggadahs, that story is why you're using the Hartman Haggadah tonight. And so we're going to ask all the members of all the generations around our Seder table, what are the stories that make you, you, and then listen with great intensity. And here's the good news. That dialogue is at the Seder, But what's most important is that it continues after the Seder. We once had a teen here who reached out to us and she said, I would like to do the following kind of mitzvah project. I want to meet a woman that I don't know, who is elderly, who has life experience. I just want to get to know her, to learn from another generation. And so the woman that we set up this teen with was Rhoda Nissenbaum, Zichrona Livracha. She was in her 90s at the time. She had very limited vision. She had very limited mobility. But she had unlimited warmth and wisdom. And this teen started meeting initially as a mitzvah project. But they grew to love each other, and she continued to meet with Rhoda Nissenbaum well after her bat mitzvah was over, through her high school years, until Rhoda passed away. And then when she passed away, this teen was at her burial because they were deeply connected. That is the blessing of a generational connection. And this morning, we saw the blessing of a generational connection. Iris, Dora V.E., seeing Lisa and Matthew, seeing Jessica and David, seeing Gabriella Rose and Asher and Gideon. That is not just reading about a day of the Lord, that is living a day of the Lord. Now, zoom out. There are a lot of prophets in ancient Israel. And there are a lot of passages in ancient Israel. Why did the rabbis pick just this prophet with just this message at just this time before we go prepare and do our seders? The last thing the rabbis want you to hear, the last thing the rabbis want you to hear before you set up your seder tables and do your seder is, generations, get it right. Parents and children, get it right. Grandparents and grandchildren, get it right. Why that message? Because Malachi knew what we all know. Because the rabbis who picked Malachi knew what we all know. And what we all know is there's no guarantee. Nobody knows how long we have. Nobody knows how long we have left. Tomorrow is promised to nobody. All we have is now. And that means the time to get it right is only now. It's the only moment we know we have. Now listen. We all know we're living in a troubled world. We all know we're living in a troubled time. We all know there's a lot of pain out there that we can't control. But the good news is that the single most important thing we can control, and that is the quality of love and harmony and peace in our home life. That's why Malachi says what he says, and that's why the rabbis wanted us to hear it. So let's get it right between the generations. And let's get it right tonight. Shabbat Shalom.